All right, let's dive into this deep dive into the world of boiler operators. You've given us quite a bit here from RoleCatcher's career guide, so it seems like you're really interested in this career path.
Yeah, it's definitely a career that's, how should I put it, heating up in terms of interest. And this guide's got it all. We're going to figure out what boiler operators really do day to day and what it takes to not just survive, but really thrive in this line of work.
From what I'm seeing here, the job title itself, boiler operator, you might just think of someone just, watching a gauge all day. But this guide paints like a much more interesting picture, wouldn't you say?
100%. I mean, first of all, you wouldn't believe the variety of boilers that you'd be responsible for. We're talking low pressure, high pressure, even those massive power boilers. And they all have their own, like, quirks, their own protocols.
So you're not just an operator, you're almost like conducting this energy orchestra. And speaking of orchestra, the guide does paint a pretty vivid picture of what the work environment's actually like, and it doesn't sound like your typical climate-controlled office, right?
Not unless your idea of office attire includes earplugs and steel-toed boots.
Okay.
The guide's very clear that you'd be dealing with,
Yeah.
heat, noise, often working at heights or in confined spaces.
Okay, so not for the faint of heart, but when you put it that way, it almost sounds like you'd be living in an action movie. Minus the explosions, hopefully. But what really stood out to me was the technology side of things. I had no idea how much automation is involved in a modern boiler room.
Right. It's not all, old school gauges and levers anymore. These days, it's digital control systems, even programming. You'd be like a tech-savvy troubleshooter, making sure those boilers are running at peak efficiency.
And speaking of efficiency, the guide talks about how important boiler operators are to, green energy, which is huge right now. It's not just keeping the lights on, it's about doing it sustainably. What kind of systems are we talking about here, and what's the biggest challenge with them?
It's a really interesting time to be in the field. There's this big shift towards biomass boilers, which, use renewable organic stuff instead of fossil fuels. The challenge, especially for someone new, is just keeping up with all the new technology. You could be installing high-efficiency condensing boilers or even systems that use solar thermal energy.
Wow, so it's a lot more than just watching a pressure gauge. It seems like there's some real potential to make an impact, both technically and environmentally. But let's switch gears for a second and talk about the career path. Starting as an entry-level boiler operator, that doesn't mean you're stuck there, right?
Not at all. This guide lays out a pretty clear progression from junior to senior roles, each with more responsibility, more expertise, and of course, more earning potential.
Now we're talking. What kind of salary bumps are we looking at as you move up?
Well, it really depends on where you are in your experience, but a senior boiler operator can easily make twice as much as someone just starting out. And that's before you even factor in any specialized certifications, which can really boost your salary.
Okay, so there's definitely an incentive to keep learning and advancing in this field. But what about these specializations you mentioned? The guide mentioned boiler water treatment. That sounds incredibly specific.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But it just goes to show how much depth there is to this career path. Imagine being the expert on the water that goes into those massive boilers, preventing corrosion, maximizing efficiency, all of that.
So it's not one size fits all. There's room to really find your niche and specialize. But even with all this technical stuff, I have a feeling soft skills are still important, right? It's not just about the machines.
You're absolutely right. The guide really emphasizes communication and teamwork. Think about it. You're the link between this complicated equipment and the people who rely on it, the engineers, the managers, even the regulators. You have to be able to explain technical things in a way that everyone understands and work together to solve problems.
So you're like a translator, a diplomat of boilers. That's a lot of hats to wear. Okay, so you've got those soft skills down pat, but what about actually getting the job? What kind of questions should you expect in an interview? And what about the RoleCatcher's guide advice really resonated with you?
The guide has this whole section on interview questions, and it's like gold, honestly. You'll get the typical questions about your experience, what types of boils you've worked with. But what I found really interesting is that they go beyond just the technical stuff. They want to know how you think.
Like, can you handle the heat, so to speak?
Yeah. They'll ask things like, imagine a boiler's acting up. Walk me through how you troubleshoot it. It's not just about knowing the steps. It's about showing them you can think logically under pressure and find solutions fast.
It's like being a boiler detective. I like it. So you ace the interview. You're officially a boiler operator. Paint me a picture of day one. What does the guide say about those early days on the job?
Okay, so picture this. You're fresh out of training, ready to take on the world of boilers. You're starting as an entry-level boiler operator, and the guide says, be ready to get your hands dirty.
No time for coffee runs then.
Not in this job. You're going to be shadowing the experienced senior operators, learning the ropes, monitoring those low-pressure boilers. Think of it as a crash course in the symphony of the boiler room.
I bet there are some great stories from those seasoned operators.
Oh, I'm sure. They've seen it all. It's like an apprenticeship. You're learning from the masters.
So you've paid your dues, and then you become a junior boiler operator. What changes at that point?
Time to take off the training wheels. As a junior boiler operator, you've got more independence. You're responsible for those low-pressure boilers, making sure everything's running smoothly.
That's gotta feel good knowing they trust you with that.
It is. And with that trust comes more responsibility. You'll be doing more thorough inspections, preventative maintenance, and tackling those inevitable boiler hiccups on your own. The guide emphasizes those problem-solving skills because no 2 days are the same in a boiler room.
Every day's a new puzzle to solve. Okay, so you've conquered low-pressure boilers. What's next for an intermediate boiler operator? What new challenges come into play?
Get ready to level up. At the intermediate level, you're moving on to the big leagues. High-pressure boilers, maybe even those massive power boilers. We're talking serious heat, serious pressure.
The stakes are higher now.
Oh, yeah. One wrong move with a high-pressure boiler. Well, let's just say the consequences could be explosive. The guide really emphasizes not just the technical know-how at this level, but also leadership skills. You might be supervising those junior operators, even training them.
So now you're responsible for the people operating the boilers, not just the boilers themselves. That's a big step. So what's the pinnacle, the top of the boiler room food chain? What does it take to reach that senior boiler operator level?
It's like reaching the summit of Mount Boiler. As a senior boiler operator, you're basically the conductor of the entire orchestra. You've got a view of the whole operation, managing a team of operators and technicians, ensuring everything's running like a well-oiled machine. Or should I say, a well-fired machine.
I bet you develop a sixth sense for boiler problems at that point.
You're telling me. The guide mentions that at this level, it's not just about fixing problems when they happen, but anticipating them before they even arise. You're the one coming up with those long-term maintenance plans, working with engineers to maximize efficiency, and always championing safety.
You become the guardian of the boiler room, making sure everything and everyone is working at their best. Now, we've talked a lot about moving up the ladder, but let's rewind back to the beginning. What do you actually need to even get your foot in the door as a boiler operator?
The good news is you don't need a PhD in thermodynamics. Usually a high school diploma or something equivalent, that's the bare minimum.
Okay, so that's the starting line. But I'm guessing it takes more than just a diploma to handle those complex systems.
Right. You'll almost certainly need to get licensed or certified as a boiler operator. But, and here's the catch, that those requirements, they can be different everywhere you go, and they depend on what type of boilers you want to work with.
So a little research into your local area is in order.
Definitely. But it's not just checking boxes. You need a solid understanding of how boilers work, all the different parts, the whole shebang. I mean, you wouldn't want someone operating on you if they didn't know anatomy, right?
Okay, that's a terrifying but fair point.
And of course, those soft skills we talked about earlier, they're still crucial. Being a team player, having a sharp eye for details, following instructions precisely, those are all essential.
So a good mix of technical chops and people skills.
Got it. So where do you even apply for these boiler operator jobs? It's not like they're just everywhere. Or are they? Actually, you might be surprised. Sure, you've got your power plants, but the guide lists a ton of industries that need boiler operators.
Like what? What other places have boilers that need operating?
Think about places with those big heating systems. Factories, manufacturing plants, hospitals, even large apartment complexes. They all need someone to keep those boilers running. And don't forget about schools, universities, government buildings. They all need heat, especially in the winter.
So chances are a boiler operator played a part in keeping this studio warm today.
Most likely. Now, while the guide says the job outlook for boiler operators is pretty good, there's one thing that caught my eye. It's that automation thing we were talking about earlier.
Right. The robots are coming for our jobs.
Well, maybe not quite yet. But seriously, the fact that more and more things are becoming automated and the focus on energy efficiency, it might affect how much demand there is for boiler operators down the line.
So it's not that the jobs are disappearing, it's more like they're changing.
Exactly. It's about adapting, evolving, just like those boiler systems themselves.
So for someone who's thinking, hey, boiler operation sounds interesting, How do they make sure their skills stay relevant?
The million-dollar question, right? The guide's advice.
Yeah.
Never stop learning. The more you know, the more valuable you are.
It's not enough to just get those initial certifications and call it a day.
Nope. The guide emphasizes getting experience on those bigger, more complicated boiler systems whenever you can. It's like leveling up in a video game. The tougher the systems you can handle, the more in demand you'll be.
So be a go-getter, seek out those challenges. What about specializing? Could that help future-proof your career?
Absolutely. Like we said before, becoming a go-to expert in something specific, like energy efficiency, safety systems, or even automation itself, that can really make you stand out.
So find that niche within boiler operation that really gets you going and become the expert in that.
Exactly. And never underestimate the power of networking.
No.
Going to those industry conferences, joining those professional organizations, talking to other boiler operators, it's how you stay in the loop about new tech and trends. Plus, you never know what doors those connections might open. New job opportunities, collaborations on cool projects, or just some good advice from someone who's been there.
Networking, it's not just for LinkedIn anymore. Speaking of seasoned pros, let's talk about the physical side of things. This isn't a desk job, is it? The guide mentioned heights, confined spaces. Sounds kind of adventurous.
Well, maybe without the Indiana Jones theme music.
Yeah.
But yeah, it can be physically demanding. Be ready for heat, noise. Those boilers aren't exactly known for being quiet. And yeah, you might have to squeeze into tight spaces for inspections or climb ladders to get to those hard-to-reach components.
So maybe not ideal for someone with a fear of heights or small spaces?
Probably not. A sense of adventure definitely helps. And it's not just the environment. The schedule can be demanding, too. Rotating shifts, weekends, holidays, it's all part of the job.
All to keep those boilers running and the world turning. It's tough work, but someone's got to do it.
That's the spirit. And speaking of tough, let's talk about safety. The guide is really big on emphasizing safety procedures and best practices.
Which makes sense. You're dealing with high-pressure systems, sometimes dangerous materials, no room for error there.
Exactly. The guide really drives home the point that you have to follow those safety procedures to a T, even the ones that seem small or unimportant.
So no cutting corners, no I'll do it later. What are some of the key safety protocols that every boiler operator should know by heart?
For starters, those pre-operation inspections, they're non-negotiable. Before you even think about firing up that boiler, you check every gauge, every valve, every single component. Got to make sure everything's in tip-top shape.
Like a pre-flight check for boilers. I like it.
Exactly. And while we're on the topic of checks, those regular maintenance routines are crucial. Think of it like taking your car in for a tune-up. You got to stay ahead of those potential problems.
Preventative maintenance is key. What other safety tips are emphasized in the guide?
Your personal protective equipment, or PPE, is your new best friend. Hard hat. Check. Safety glasses, double check. Earplugs, gloves, steel-toed boots, you name it, you wear it.
Safety first, fashion second. What about those break glass in case of emergency situations? The guide has to cover those, right? Because things don't always go as planned, even with boilers.
Of course. The guide really stresses knowing those emergency procedures like the back of your hand. What happens if there's a sudden pressure drop, a leak, heaven forbid, a fire? Those are all scenarios that every boiler operator needs to be ready for.
It's not just about knowing how to operate the boilers, but also how to handle those high-pressure moments.
Precisely. And that's where those soft skills come in again. Staying calm under pressure, communicating clearly during an emergency, working as a team. Those are just as important as your technical skills when it comes to safety.
So safety is a team effort, just like everything else in the boiler room. Now, we've talked about the good, the challenging, but let's be real. There are always some less glamorous parts of any job. The guide doesn't shy away from those, does it?
Not at all. It gives you the real deal about what it's like to work in a boiler room. The good, the bad, and the sometimes sweaty.
So no sugarcoating. What are some of the biggest challenges boiler operators face day to day?
Well, for one, the work environment itself. Boiler rooms are not exactly known for being climate-controlled spas.
Not your typical office setting.
Unless your office has earplugs and industrial fans as standard equipment.
Yeah.
And then there's the nature of the work itself. You're dealing with high-pressure systems, constantly troubleshooting, often working long or irregular hours. It can be demanding, both physically and mentally.
Not a job for the faint of heart or those who need a predictable schedule.
Definitely not. But for someone who enjoys a challenge, who likes working with their hands and their minds, who gets a sense of satisfaction from knowing their work is important, boiler operation can be a really rewarding career.
It's all about finding that balance, right?
Exactly. And the guide does a good job of showing both sides of that coin.
We did talk about those nice salary bumps earlier, but money isn't everything. What about those less tangible rewards? What do people find most fulfilling about being a boiler operator?
You know, for many, it's the feeling that their work really makes a difference. They're keeping hospitals running, schools heated, factories powered, essential stuffs.
The unsung heroes of infrastructure.
Exactly. And because the work often involves working independently, a lot of operators like that autonomy, that trust. They're given the responsibility to manage their own workload, figure out solutions, make decisions that have a real impact.
So for someone who values independence and seeing the tangible results of their work, that's a big plus.
Definitely. But it's not all about working solo. Boiler operation also requires great teamwork and communication.
Right, you're not just down there in the boiler room by yourself.
Yeah, exactly. You're constantly interacting with other operators, technicians, engineers, managers. It's a team effort.
So how does that teamwork play out in the day-to-day?
Well, it can be anything from brainstorming solutions to a tricky problem, to coordinating maintenance schedules, to training new team members.
It's a mix of that technical knowledge with those essential people skills.
Precisely. And those who are good at communicating, collaborating, and building those positive working relationships, they're the ones who really thrive in this field.
It's not just a job, it's a whole work family down there in the boiler room. Now, we like to talk about lifelong learning here on the show, and we've already established that the world of boilers is always evolving, with new tech popping up all the time. How can boiler operators stay ahead of the curve?
The guide stresses that continuous learning isn't optional, it's essential.
No time for complacency in the boiler room.
Exactly. Those who are willing to keep learning, to pick up new skills, to embrace new technology, those are the ones who will not just survive, but really thrive in this industry.
So how do you stay up to date? We're talking beyond those initial certifications now?
Well, industry conferences and workshops are a great way to do that. You're learning about the latest and greatest tech, meeting other professionals, picking up valuable tips and tricks.
Like a boot camp for your brain.
Exactly. And a lot of these conferences offer those continuing education credits, which you might need to maintain your certifications.
So you're boosting your resume while you're boosting your knowledge. Win-win. What else does the guide recommend?
Online courses are fantastic. They're flexible, so you can learn at your own pace, on your own time.
No need to quit your day job to level up your skills.
Exactly. And there are courses for everything boiler-related. Basic maintenance, advanced control systems, you name it.
A whole buffet of boiler knowledge. And let's not forget the power of just reading, right?
Absolutely. Industry magazines, technical journals, even online forums. There's so much information out there.
It's a treasure trove of boiler wisdom, and the best part about being a lifelong learner is that it keeps you engaged, challenged, no matter what stage of your career you're in.
Couldn't agree more.
Now, let's get down to business the job search. It's a competitive world out there, so what tips does the guide offer for landing that dream job in the boiler room?
First impressions matter. Your resume and cover letter, that's your chance to grab their attention. Make sure they're tailored to the specific job you're after, highlighting the skills and experiences that are most relevant.
So no generic one-size-fits-all applications.
Right. Show those hiring managers why you're the boiler whisperer they need. And when it comes to the interview, preparation is key. Brush up on your boiler knowledge, practice answering those tough technical questions, and be ready to talk about why you're passionate about this line of work.
Enthusiasm goes a long way.
Definitely. And don't be afraid to ask questions yourself. It shows you're engaged, curious, ready to learn.
It's a two-way street. You're interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you. Now, the guide mentions something called pre-employment assessments. What are those all about?
Those assessments, they're designed to test you. Your technical knowledge, problem-solving skills, maybe even your mechanical aptitude.
So they want to see if you can walk the walk, not just talk the talk.
Exactly. They might give you hypothetical boiler problems and ask you to troubleshoot them, or test your knowledge of safety regulations and best practices.
So it's a good idea to brush up on those boiler basics before you go. What about salary expectations? I'm sure the guide talks about that, right?
It does. And while salaries can vary a lot depending on location, experience, and the specific industry, the guide gives a good overview of what you can expect as a boiler operator.
Give us the numbers. What kind of salary range are we talking about?
Well, for those just starting out, entry-level positions, they usually pay somewhere around insert salary range per year. But with experience, certifications, and as you move up to those senior roles, you can see those earnings really climb.
So there's definitely potential for a good living, even some financial growth in this field.
For sure. And don't forget about benefits. Things like health insurance, retirement plans, paid time off, those are all important factors to consider when you're looking at a job offer.
Great point. Now, let's talk about something that's more important than ever, the environmental impact of all this. It's not just about keeping those boilers running, it's about doing it in a way that's good for the planet.
Absolutely. Sustainability is a big deal in the boiler world these days, and for good reason. Those traditional boiler systems, especially the ones that burn fossil fuels, they can really guzzle energy and pump out emissions.
So what's being done to make boiler operation greener? Is the industry cleaning up its act?
They are. There's a big push to use cleaner fuels and even switch over to renewable energy sources.
So moving away from those dirty fossil fuels.
Exactly. A lot of facilities are switching to natural gas, which burns much cleaner than coal or oil. Less pollution, better air quality.
That's a good start. But what about those truly renewable options? Are we seeing those being used in boilers yet?
We are. Biomass boilers, the ones that burn organic materials like wood chips or agricultural waste, those are gaining popularity.
So instead of relying on fossil fuels, they're using resources that can be replenished. That's a game changer. What other innovations are happening in the name of sustainability?
Efficiency. Boiler manufacturers are working hard to develop boilers that squeeze every last bit of energy out of the fuel they burn.
So boilers that sip fuel instead of chugging it.
Exactly. These high-efficiency boilers have cool features like condensing flue gas technology, which captures waste heat and uses it to preheat water, saving a ton of energy.
That's some seriously clever engineering. What about emissions control? Are there ways to clean up the exhaust before it goes out into the world?
Definitely. Flue gas scrubbers are being used more and more. They basically remove those harmful pollutants from the exhaust gases before they're released into the air.
So it's like giving those exhaust gases a good scrub before they head out the door.
Exactly. And it's not just about what comes out, it's about what goes in too.
You mean the water?
Yep. Water treatment is super important for both efficiency and sustainability. By treating the water that goes into the boiler, you prevent corrosion, reduce scaling, and make the system last longer. All of that means less waste and less need for replacements.
So it's a holistic approach to sustainability, from the fuel source to the emissions to the water.
Absolutely. And it's great to see the industry really embracing these changes.
Now, we've talked a lot about the technical side, but let's not forget about the human side. The guide mentioned that boiler operators are often part of a larger team working with other professionals.
Oh yeah, it's a team effort for sure.
So what are those team dynamics like? Who else does a boiler operator work with on a regular basis?
Well, first off, there's the maintenance crew.
Mm.
The mechanics, electricians, technicians. Those are the folks who keep the entire facility in good shape.
So you need to be able to communicate effectively with them, work together to solve problems.
Exactly. Then there are the engineers, the ones who design and optimize those complex systems.
I'm sure there's a lot of back and forth between boiler operators and engineers, especially when it comes to troubleshooting or implementing those energy efficiency measures we talked about.
Absolutely. Open communication is key. Boiler operators are often the eyes and ears on the ground, providing valuable feedback to the engineers.
So it's a two-way street, the operators providing real-world observations and the engineers using that information to fine-tune things. What about management? Do boiler operators interact much with them?
Definitely. Whether it's reporting on how the systems are running, discussing maintenance needs, or addressing any safety concerns, communication with management is crucial.
So being able to communicate clearly with people at all different levels of the organization, from the technicians to the managers, is a must-have skill for boiler operators.
For sure.
Okay, so we've covered the skills, the challenges, the rewards, but let's talk personality for a second. What kind of person makes a good boiler operator?
Well, first and foremost, you got to be a problem solver. Boilers are complex, and things are going to go wrong. You need to be able to think critically, troubleshoot, find solutions quickly.
A little bit of a detective, a little bit of an engineer.
Exactly. And since you're often working independently, you need to be responsible, reliable, able to manage your own time.
No clock watchers allowed.
Not in this job. And attention to detail is huge. Overlooking something small could lead to big problems down the road.
So someone who's meticulous, who doesn't cut corners. What about communication skills? We touched on that earlier, but how important is it for boiler operators to be good communicators?
It's absolutely essential. Whether you're explaining a technical issue to a colleague, writing up a report, or talking to management, being able to communicate clearly and effectively is crucial.
You need to be able to speak the language of the boiler room and the boardroom.
Exactly. And since safety is paramount, being able to clearly communicate about potential hazards, safety procedures, emergency protocols, that's non-negotiable.
Being able to explain complex things in a way that anyone can understand, that's a valuable skill.
Absolutely. And of course, there's teamwork.
Right. It's not a solo mission in the boiler room.
Not at all. Boiler operators are part of a team working together to keep those systems up and running.
So what does that collaboration look like in action?
It could be anything. Working together to solve a tricky problem, figuring out maintenance schedules, even training new operators.
So it's a blend of technical expertise, problem solving, and people skills, a true triple threat.
You got it.
Now, we've talked a lot about the skills and the personality traits that make a good boiler operator, but what about the mindset? Is there a particular attitude that those who excel in this field tend to have?
I'd say it's a combination of curiosity, a thirst for knowledge, and a genuine passion for the work.
So it's not just about clocking in and clocking out.
No way. The best boiler operators are the ones who really want to understand how things work, who get excited about new technology, and who find genuine satisfaction in keeping those complex systems running smoothly.
It's about taking pride in your work, always striving to learn and improve.
Exactly. And that passion shows not just in the work they do, but also in how they interact with their colleagues and their commitment to safety.
It's about more than just ticking boxes. It's about having the right attitude.
100%.
We've covered a lot of ground today, from the nitty-gritty of boiler operation to the big picture stuff like sustainability and the importance of soft skills.
It's been quite a journey.
It has. But before we wrap things up, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier. Automation and its impact on the future of this field.
Ah, yes, the robot in the room.
Exactly. Automation is changing everything, and boiler operation is no exception. So how is this technology impacting the work of boiler operators?
Well, like you might expect, automation is taking over a lot of those tasks that used to be done manually.
So instead of always watching gauges and adjusting valves, boiler operators are relying more on automated systems to do some of that work.
Exactly. Modern boiler systems have sophisticated sensors, control systems, and software that can monitor and adjust operations much more precisely than a human ever could.
It's like having a co-pilot in the boiler room.
Right. But it's important to remember that automation isn't about replacing boiler operators altogether. It's more about giving them better tools and letting them focus on those tasks that require human expertise.
So they're becoming more like system supervisors, overseeing the automated processes and stepping in when needed.
Exactly. As automation handles those more routine tasks, the role of the boiler operator is shifting more towards monitoring, troubleshooting, and optimizing those automated systems.
So less hands-on operation, more high-level thinking and problem-solving.
Precisely. Boiler operators of the future will need to be skilled at analyzing data, spotting those patterns, and using that information to make sure those systems are running at peak efficiency.
So those analytical skills are becoming even more important in this new age of automation.
Definitely. But it's not just about technical skills. It's also about critical thinking, problem solving, adaptability.
Because even the smartest machines can run into unexpected problems.
Absolutely. And that's where human experience and judgment are irreplaceable. Boiler operators will need to be able to think on their feet, troubleshoot those curveballs, and make decisions that keep everyone and everything safe.
So it's not man versus machine, it's more like man and a machine working together.
Exactly. Automation is a tool that can make boiler operators even better at what they do.
That's reassuring. So for those who are thinking about a career in this field, what does all this mean for them? How should they prepare for this more automated future?
Don't be afraid of technology. Embrace it. Learn everything you can about it. Get comfortable working with those automated systems.
Don't just learn how to operate the boilers, learn how the software that runs them works.
Exactly. Get familiar with those control systems, maybe even learn some basic programming.
Become a tech-savvy boiler operator.
Exactly. And don't forget about those soft skills we talked about. Communication, teamwork, problem solving, adaptability.
Those are always going to be important no matter how much technology changes.
Absolutely. Being able to communicate effectively, collaborate with others, and adapt to new situations and technologies, those are the skills that will help you succeed in this field.
So the message is clear. Embrace technology, never stop learning, and hone those people skills.
Well said.
Now, let's shift gears for a bit and talk about safety regulations and best practices.
Safety first, always.
Absolutely. Working with high-pressure systems, sometimes dangerous materials that requires constant vigilance.
You got it. The guide really emphasizes the importance of strictly adhering to all those safety regulations and best practices.
No cutting corners.
Exactly. It's about creating a culture of safety where everyone feels empowered to speak up if they see something that's not right, even if it's something small. It's about building a culture where everyone feels empowered to speak up if they see something that seems off, even just a little bit.
Because a safe boiler room is a happy boiler room and a productive one. Now, the guide mentions that boiler operators might need to obtain specific licenses or certifications related to safety. What's the deal with those, and how do they differ from those initial certifications we talked about earlier?
You're right. It's not a one-and-done kind of deal. Those initial certifications are like your learner's permit in the boiler world. They get you behind the wheel, so to speak.
Right.
But those safety-specific licenses and certifications, those are your proof that you know how to navigate the roads responsibly and handle any unexpected detours.
Love that analogy. So tell us more about these safety certifications. What do they typically involve, and how does someone go about getting them?
Think of it like this. You wouldn't want to fly in a plane with a pilot who just skimmed the safety manual, right?
Definitely not.
Same goes for boilers. These safety certifications are your way of showing employers, and yourself, that you're serious about safety and that you've got the knowledge and skills to handle any situation that might arise.
So it's about accountability, expertise, and peace of mind for everyone involved. Now let's dive into some of those real-world scenarios where those safety certifications come into play. What are some of the most common hazards that boiler operators need to be prepared for, and how do those safety protocols mitigate those risks?
One of the biggest concerns in any boiler room is obviously the risk of explosions.
Of course.
It's rare, thankfully, thanks to strict regulations and safety protocols, but it's something that every boiler operator needs to be acutely aware of.
Right, because those boilers are working with some serious heat and pressure. One wrong move could have disastrous consequences.
Exactly. That's why those regular inspections and maintenance procedures we talked about earlier are so crucial. And it's not just about following a checklist. It's about really understanding the systems, recognizing potential warning signs, and knowing when to call in the experts if something seems amiss.
So it's about having that blend of knowledge, experience, and a healthy dose of caution. What other hazards does the guide highlight? And what are some of the safety measures that boiler operators rely on to stay safe?
Well, burns are another obvious risk. Those boilers can get seriously hot.
I can imagine.
That's why personal protective equipment, or PPE, is non-negotiable in this line of work. We're talking heat-resistant gloves, protective eyewear, the whole 9 yards. And it's not just about suiting up. It's about knowing how to use that equipment properly and understanding its limitations.
Because even the best gear in the world won't protect you if you're not using it correctly.
Exactly. And then there are those less obvious hazards, like exposure to hazardous chemicals or the risks associated with working at heights or in confined spaces.
Right. Those might not be as dramatic as an explosion, but they can still pose serious risks if proper precautions aren't taken. What are some of the protocols in place to mitigate those less obvious but equally important risks?
Well, when it comes to hazardous chemicals, knowledge is power. Boiler operators need to be aware of the specific chemicals used in their systems, understand their potential risks, and know how to handle them safely.
So a crash course in chemistry might be on the curriculum for aspiring boiler operators.
It's all part of the job. And those material safety data sheets, MSDS for short, are like their boiler room Bible. They provide detailed information about each chemical, including its properties, potential hazards, and emergency procedures. It's essential knowledge.
So if those chemicals were characters in a movie, the MSDS would be their rep sheets, telling you everything you need to know to stay safe.
Exactly. And when it comes to those physical hazards, like working at heights or in confined spaces, it's all about training, awareness, and following those safety protocols religiously.
No exceptions.
Absolutely. And that might mean using fall protection equipment, ensuring proper ventilation in confined spaces, or having a buddy system in place for those riskier tasks. It's all about minimizing those risks and putting safety first, always.
Now, we've covered a lot of ground today, from the technical skills and career paths to the importance of safety and sustainability. But there's one burning question I have to ask. What's the coolest thing about being a boiler operator? What's the thing that makes you say, yeah, this is the job for me?
You know, it's funny you should ask that. I was talking to a seasoned boiler operator just the other day, someone who's been in the field for over 30 years. And you know what he said?
Do tell, I'm on the edge of my seat.
He said, it's the puzzles.
Yeah.
He loves the challenge of troubleshooting those complex systems, figuring out what's wrong, and bringing those boilers back to life. It's like solving a giant mechanical puzzle every single day.
I love that. So it's that sense of accomplishment, that feeling of being a master of those intricate systems. It's almost like being a boiler whisperer, right?
Exactly. And for others, it's the knowledge that their work matters, that they're playing a vital role in keeping essential services running.
They're the unsung heroes of hospitals, schools, factories, the list goes on.
Absolutely. And in a world that's increasingly reliant on technology, there's something really satisfying about working with your hands, understanding those fundamental principles of thermodynamics, and keeping those essential systems humming along.
It's the perfect blend of brains and brawn. Well, listener, we've thrown a lot of information your way in this deep dive into the world of boiler operators. We've explored the skills, the challenges, the rewards, and the ever-evolving landscape of this vital profession. So whether you're just starting your career exploration or you're a seasoned pro looking for a change, we hope this deep dive has given you a lot to think about.
And remember, the world needs skilled and dedicated boiler operators to keep those essential systems running smoothly and safely.
That's right. And who knows, maybe you'll be the one designing those high-tech, eco-friendly boilers of the future.
The possibilities are endless.
On that note, we'll wrap things up for today. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of boiler operators. We'll catch you next time for another fascinating career exploration.